Hey, what's going on? Today we are going to talk about 7 triggers for those people who have an anxious attachment style. If you're not familiar with attachment style, it's simply, or attachment theory, is simply the theory that our early childhood relationship with our caregivers determines the way that we try to relate to people as adults, especially romantic partners. I've done a whole video on the 4 different attachment styles. You can check that out. In this specific video, we're going to cover 7 triggers for those with anxious attachment style. The hope is, if that's you, you will recognize maybe some things that are triggering you and how to deal with that. And then if you're in a relationship with somebody who has an anxious attachment style, this may help you recognize some of the things that trigger them and get the emotional reaction and response that you are confused about so that you can avoid them and help them in the relationship. That's what we're going to talk about today on Relation Shots. Hey, welcome to Relation Shots. My name is Eric Wooten. If this is your first time hanging out with us, welcome to the place to get practical relationship advice that actually works in your relationship. If you have not already done so, go ahead and click the subscribe button and the bell notification so you don't miss any upcoming videos. If you want a free guide to intimacy, you'll see a link in the description area below. If you're a married couple and you do not have community, connection with other couples, resources to help you strengthen your relationship, you need to be a part of our Altered Marriage membership community where you'll get access to all that and more, live Zoom calls, other couples, resources, everything you need to have a marriage that is going to thrive and go the distance. So check out those links in the description area below. So today we're going to talk about specifically the anxious attachment style and 7 triggers. But first, let's kind of define what this is. Most people say that an anxious attachment style usually develops when a person had a childhood where their caregivers were inconsistent in whether or not they would respond to the child's needs. And so the child didn't know when in stress, whether they would be comforted or ignored, which then hyperactivates their attachment system, their nervous system, to where as adults, now they are uncertain in relationships. So adults that have an anxious attachment style tend to be clingy to their partners. They tend to need a high or have a high need for approval from their partner, and they have a high need for assurance from their partner that they're not going to leave them in a relationship. That's generally some of the characteristics of somebody who has that anxious attachment style. And if that's you or somebody that you're in a relationship with, let's cover 7 triggers that can actually exasperate or just activate really the nervous system of somebody with this attachment style. So trigger number 1 is when they have a partner who is inconsistent. So again, this was kind of what they had in childhood when you have a partner that's hot and cold, or tells you they're going to call you, don't call you, tells you they want honesty and the truth, and you give them the truth, and then they get mad at the truth because they don't like it, or whatever other inconsistency there is. All that's going to do is take them back to what they didn't have as childhood, make them uncertain about the relationship, which is going to be a trigger for them and cause some anxiety because they don't know. Does this person want to be with me? Do they not want to be with me? Last time they did this. This time they did something different. Last time when I did this, they responded this way. This time when I did it, they responded different. And so that uncertainty in the relationship is going to be a trigger for somebody with an anxious attachment style. Trigger number 2 is distance. So you can imagine somebody who desires intimacy and closeness. Whenever there's distance, it's going to trigger them. So that may be, maybe you just don't call them back. Don't call them when you're supposed to call them. Maybe you take too long in their mind to respond to a text. Maybe you're with them, but you're distracted on your phone watching TV, and they just don't feel the proximity and assurance that they really want from you. And so whenever there is distance in the relationship, they are going to feel some kind of anxiety about it, and they're going to want more closeness, so they're going to tend to be clingy again. So number 2 is distance. Number 3 is a partner who is dismissive. Again, because they have a high need for approval, they want to make their partner happy. Whenever their partner is dismissive of them, that's going to cause them to get a little bit activated in their nervous system again, because they don't want to be dismissed. They want closeness. And so whenever they're dismissed or maybe even criticized at times, they're going to feel their system getting a little bit triggered, because they feel like, well, maybe this person doesn't want to be with me. Why are they being dismissive to me? They're not here presently. So being emotionally present is huge for them. And so if you have somebody who is not emotionally present, who is not emotionally engaged, that dismissiveness is going to trigger them for sure. The next one is anger. Now, obviously, there's probably a lot of people going, hey, listen, nobody likes anger. Absolutely. Nobody's excited about anger in a relationship, but there's a huge difference between somebody who is securely attached dealing with a partner's anger and somebody who has an anxious attachment dealing with a partner's anger, because there are times in relationship when people are going to get hurt, they're going to get frustrated, they're going to get angry, and righteously angry, right? There are some justified angers, but somebody with an anxious attachment style, even when there's moderate or justified anger, that's going to hyperactivate them and put them in overdrive because they don't know how to deal with that. And it'll quickly make them fear, if this person's angry at me, they're not pleased with me. If they're not pleased with me, they're probably not going to stay with me. So now my fear of abandonment is going to kick in, and I'm going to wonder if this person really wants to be with me. And so they don't often handle anger well. And even justified or moderate anger can become a trigger for someone with an anxious attachment style. Trigger number 5 is rejection, and rejection might be the number one, the mother of all triggers for somebody with anxious attachment style. Because remember, this is the source of their pain as a kid. They felt that rejection when their caregiver was not there for them in the way that they thought they should be, or was inconsistent. They created narratives for themselves. So even the slightest hint of rejection for somebody with anxious attachment style is going to hyperactivate their nervous system. And listen, what that means is even good, healthy, critical feedback can still feel like rejection. And so you got to figure out how to reassure them as you're giving feedback so that rejection doesn't take them in a whole different direction. But at the slightest hint of rejection, they are absolutely going to be activated. Number 6 is high expectations. Now remember, a person with an anxious attachment style wants to please their partner, wants to make their partner happy, wants to make sure everything's good in the relationship. And so if they're given high expectations and they fear they won't be able to meet those expectations, they will immediately begin to believe, if I don't meet these expectations, they'll be disappointed. And if they're disappointed and I can't meet their expectations, they will not stay in relationship with me. And so it will trigger and activate them again. And if you combine high expectations with very low or absent nurturing and reassurance of any kind, you have a double whammy for them. So if you do have high expectations, you need to consistently reassure them of your commitment to the relationship. And even if they fall short, that this is not a personal issue, this is something we're working on in the relationship, but the relationship is not in jeopardy just because you may not have met an expectation of mine. Which goes back to the anger. If you have an unmet expectation and you get angry, now you can see again how they might be triggered. Oh, not only are they mad at me, but I'm not meeting their expectations. The relationship is going to be in jeopardy again. And a 7th trigger for somebody with anxious attachment style is a partner who exhibits some independence. So they may have a partner who says, you know what, I want some me time, or I want some time with friends, or I want to do some stuff on my own. For somebody with an anxious attachment style, that will cause fear about the relationship, because generally people with an anxious attachment style want to do everything together with their partner. They feel like that closeness and that intimacy is the security for the relationship. So if I have a partner who wants to do some things independently, now I'm fearful about safety in the relationship. I feel like the relationship might not be secure. And now I'm beginning to become clingy again. Maybe this is the person who, when you're out with friends, is calling you 57 times, texting you a whole bunch, is nervous, wondering when you're going to be home. Listen, it's not just simply because they're jealous or controlling. It's probably because their attachment system is getting activated. They're feeling nervous because you want some independence from them, and they're worried about the state of the relationship. So, 7 triggers that can cause anxiety for somebody with an anxious attachment style and can cause stress for them in the relationship. If that's you, then part of the way that you cope and deal with that is, one, you need to learn emotional regulation. Part of it is learning how to manage and deal with and feel your emotions so you can control them better. I think you also want to be able to express clearly to the person you're in relationship with how some of these things impact you and how you're feeling, so they can have a little more empathy around how you're feeling around these things. I think you also need to remind yourself of your worth. That you do have value and you do have worth, and it's not always tied to this relationship. And sometimes you got to speak truth to yourself about the relationship. It's not in jeopardy. They're not going to leave you. You are secure, and you sometimes have to remind yourself, if you're somebody in relationship with a person with anxious attachment style, be aware of these, and be aware of not exasperating their anxiety by exhibiting any of these triggers. And if you notice that they're being triggered, if you notice that they're maybe having an over-exaggerated reaction or response, it's probably because their system is getting triggered, and what they need is closeness, they need assurance, and they need nurturing from you to know that things are okay and the relationship is still stable. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this in the comment section below. Maybe you recognize yourself in this. Is this your style? Drop a comment. Let us know what you do to cope with it, and how you manage a relationship. Or if you're in a relationship with somebody and it sounds like that's them, what are some things you found that have been helpful to maintain the security of the relationship and help them regulate a little bit when they start getting stressed with that? If we can help you in any area of your relationship, we'd love to walk alongside you, whether that's a class, a course, counseling, or our marriage membership. Any of the links below you'll see. Let us know. We'd love to walk with you on your relationship journey. And until next time, I'll see you right back here on Relation Shots.